Our very own Jen Schonberger standing by with acting Labor Secretary Julie Su there for the latest on that jobs data that came out this morning. Jen.
Thanks, guys. I am indeed here with acting Labor Secretary Julie Su. Secretary Su, thank you so much for joining me.
So good to be here with you every month.
Great to be with you every month as well. We saw a cooling in the job market last month to kick off the second quarter. Is this the beginning of a sea change?
No, this is a continuation of the strong, steady job growth that we have seen since President Biden came into office. We've now seen over 15.4 million jobs created. The unemployment rate remains below 4% still. That's the 27-month straight. And labor force participation rate for prime age workers continue to tick up. In fact, for women, it's the highest ever on record. And we started recording this data back when President Truman was elected. It's the highest since that moment. And so we are just seeing not just historic job gains, but broad-based job gains.
And what about wage growth in particular? Because we saw that tick down to 3.9%. Expectations were for 4%, which would have been in line for the month prior. Do you think that that is a moderation or perhaps signs for bigger cracks?
I think that, because wages continue to outpace inflation, that's a good thing. Very fundamental to the president's vision for this country is that working people do well. And when working families have more money in their pockets, they have more breathing room. That is a sign of Bidenomics working. And so wages continue to go up, especially for low and middle income Americans, which also leads to, more equity, more of a fair share.
Prior to the pandemic, the understanding was that we needed to add 100,000 jobs a month to keep up with population growth. Now that we've seen a surge in immigration, the understanding, there's a new report out, I should say, from the Brookings Institute, which estimates that that's actually doubled to 200,000. And economists seem to be in agreement with that. Are you in agreement with that? Do you think that this economy needs to add more jobs per month to keep up with population growth? And if that's the case, what does that mean about the strength of the job market?
I would say that the numbers, not just this month, but every month, demonstrate continued strength. And what the president said over a year ago now was that 150,000 was about the right number. We have been steadily moving in that direction after the extremely hot growth that we saw initially in 2021. And the increasingly steady numbers that we've seen throughout 2022 and 2023. And 2024 remains, strong when it comes to growth in industries that were devastated in the pandemic, and in a way that is, showing that, again, over 15 million people since the president came into office are in jobs, are bringing home an income that allows them to afford the basic things they need in life.
We got to get you a cup of water here. I want to ask you about productivity for the first quarter. Those numbers showing a bit of slowing. Granted, one report does not make a trend, but are you worried that productivity is starting to wane?
That's a very important point about why we look at numbers each month, but why we also look at overall trends. And the overall trend in the economy is that productivity is up. That means when we talk about workers getting their fair share, that also means that the overall pie is bigger. And when the overall pie is bigger, that provides more opportunity for more working Americans too. And so what we want to keep on seeing is productivity increase while wages increase, so that, again, working people enjoy the gains in that productivity that they make possible.
Switching gears a bit, Secretary, I want to ask you about the rule that the FTC recently passed last week, basically to ban non-compete clauses in employment contracts. Barring any legal challenges, how do you see this impacting the labor market?
It's one of many things that is happening under the president's leadership to make sure that working people get a fair shake, that they have more flexibility, right? That this is a way of empowering working people. And we come here every month and talk about the numbers, which are really important. But the numbers are only one part of the story. So rules like the one that you mentioned is also how the president is delivering on his promise to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, where working people do well. We've also announced other rules that are part and parcel of that big vision. Well, we are restoring the 40-hour work week for millions of working Americans through our overtime rule. We are making sure that retirement security is real so that American workers can retire with dignity. We are seeing and delivering for workers who've been left out of our economy for too long, from mine workers to farm workers. So that rule, like our others, are really about prioritizing working people as we build this economy and make America strong.
You mentioned briefly the overtime rule. I want to drill into that a little bit more. You finalized that rule last week. There are two thresholds for salaries now. One kicks in July 1st. Right. The next one kicking in the beginning of next year, January 1st. What impact do you think that's going to have on employment in this country, as well as the economy overall? Because on the one hand, it may help workers' wages, but on the other hand, I wonder how employers are going to look at this.
So the reason why there are overtime laws in this country is because we both want to make sure that when workers work longer hours, they are compensated for it, right? It's part of the promise of a fair day's pay for a hard day's work. And also, historically, it was to make sure that working people didn't have to work too long of hours. Our rule now restores that basic promise. So when overtime rules were first put into place, the salary threshold, some 60% of American workers were eligible for overtime based on threshold. In the last administration, that number dropped to the single digits. So we are restoring this to basically, making sure that millions more Americans who work over 40 hours in a week get the pay that they deserve. And either, they're going to get more money in their pockets, which, as we've talked about many times, is good for the economy, it's good for spending, it's good for working families, or they're going to be able to work a little bit less, which will also mean that they'll have more time with their families.
And before I let you go, we always talk about women and the economy and the job market. Women's participation in the labor force hit an all-time high.
That's right.
78%. That's right. Why do you think that's the case, and what can we do to even improve it from here?
I mean, we have talked about this before, too, how women have really powered this economic recovery. Women coming into the labor market, women, doing jobs from all across our economy. And what we see is, in terms of economic trends, women tend to come into the labor market more when there are good jobs, when pay is higher. So that's another indication. But I think, the real story is also that we still remain behind as a country compared to other countries when it comes to women's labor force participation rate. And that is because we are the only industrialized nation that does not have a national paid leave policy. And we have a study that the Department of Labor has put out that makes very clear that if we had a care infrastructure and we invested in family supporting policies like paid leave, it could bring another 5 million or so women into the labor market to the tune of $775 billion in economic activity a year. So when women are able to work, when they are supported in their work, that is another sign of economic strength. And we are certainly seeing that, and we still have more work to do on it.
All right. Well, to be continued. Secretary Sue, thank you so much, as always, for your insight.